For Blair, the question now is that the amendment be agreed to, and I call the member for Mallee.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I was actually drawn to speak on this bill because childcare is a serious issue in my electorate of Mallee. And I note the title of this bill, Wage Justice for Early Childhood Education and Care Workers. Justice is important to people on both sides of this House. There is no question about that. But I think that we look through different prisms, and my electorate is regional, absolutely regional. I have 72 towns in my electorate, many without childcare. In fact, I would go so far as to say most without childcare. So when we're talking about subsidies and we're talking about wage rises, yes, there is a place for those things, but when you don't have a childcare centre and a mother has to drive, or a father has to drive 2 hours down the road to take their child to childcare before they can go to work and then return the trip at the end of the day, you are asking an immense amount from people who are already working their butts off. It is creating such a stress in my electorate, and, you know, we have what are called childcare deserts, and there is not a lot in this bill that addresses that at all. And I would draw the House's attention to that. You know, I note that there's $3.6 billion for wages, that people who are earning $530,000 per annum combined can get those subsidies. I don't know on which planet that is a reasonable suggestion, but that's what's going through this House. However, for those where there is no childcare, there are no subsidies coming their way because they can't put their child into childcare and work. This is not justice. This is injustice, and this issue needs to be addressed by the House and by this government. In Hopetoun is a particular one of the towns in my electorate, and I've been working with the Yarriambiack Shire Council for the last few years since Uniting closed their service, and I'm hopeful the situation will be resolved shortly. I understand the council is working with another childcare provider, Emerge, and we're hoping that a childcare or the workforce will emerge so that these children can attend the childcare centre. Uniting's closure in Hopetoun left 15 to 20 families in a difficult situation. Heather from Beulah came to me as the major income earner in her family. Heather loves her town of Beulah and wants to stay. She doesn't want to go back to the city to raise her children. The town has lost their hotel, their supermarket, and lack of childcare in Hopetoun means people are now having to travel even further to get childcare. Another mother from Hopetoun wrote in capital letters to me, and, you know, on social media, that's the equivalent of yelling, and she said, "We need childcare in Hopetoun," followed by "please, please, please." I wonder how many urban parents are having to beg their local members for a childcare centre. She noted that mothers had to stop working or cut hours back to help out others to look after their children so they could go to work. Is this justice? I don't think so. Earlier this year, some grandparents from Edenhope raised with me the importance of childcare, saying it's difficult to get places and many young women want to work but they just can't find a childcare place. Maryborough. Lisa lives in Maryborough. She wrote to me in November about a huge impact the cost of living is having on her and was, in her own words, extremely stressed out at the time as she was on maternity leave and facing what she called massive childcare shortages. Lisa wrote to me, and I quote, "The Council and the state Labor government aren't taking this seriously. What has this Labor government done so far? Nothing." Lisa says that her regional centre of Maryborough has a population of around 8,000 people and has 2 childcare centres, each with 75 places, whereas Horsham, with a population of over 20,000 people, has 8 centres. Lisa complained that it's hard to retain workers in Maryborough with no further childcare available. In Matoa, Just this last weekend, I was in Matoa for Matoa's big weekend and talked with Dr Kendra Clegg, who has been working with me for the last couple of years, desperately needing childcare in Matoa. And I had the pleasure of catching up with Kendra down at the big weekend. She said, the Matoa model of integrating early years learning with, in this instance, Matoa College, is a model that could potentially be used elsewhere in regional Victoria and regional Australia to address childcare shortages. A happy outcome of the new centre, which is opening next year, as I understand it, is that several senior students want to begin early years Certificate 3 studies, and I would hope end up working locally to support children and families in Matoa in the new childhood education, which the state is funding. I would note that this bill isn't necessarily for the grant funding to be provided. The grant could have been provided through existing legislative powers. This bill doesn't even set the wage increase or how much providers will be paid to cover for it. The bill has not yet got through the Senate where the Greens have signalled they want more petrol on the inflation bonfire. And the government's spending commitment is only for the first 2 years of the wage increase. And then that cost will go on to the providers. This bill is a political posturing move from the Albanese government, and I note there is a concurrent Senate inquiry process, even though the bill is before this House, scheduled to conclude by the 30th of October, in time for the resumption of sittings in November. The Shadow Minister for Early Childhood Education, who spoke earlier, and is shortly coming to my electorate of Mallee to see the childcare desert, which no one from Labor has bothered to look at, told the House in August, and it bears repeating now, the sector tells me a 10% wage increase usually means a 7% fee increase. The biggest farce with the current bill is that Labor think they can inject $3.6 billion into the sector of taxpayers' money and keep fees down using a cap. There's a real chance that services already paying staff 10 or 15% above the award wage won't sign on to this. They'll pay their staff a little bit more and then they'll just increase their prices anyway, and that will land in families, come out of families' pockets. Even if some services keep fees down this year and next year, families will still be hit with eye-watering bills when the government funding dries up, because providers will then be forced to pick up the wages tab and to do what they can by increasing fees. A union heavily involved in the early learning sector is back to its old tricks, telling educators they'll only get this pay rise if they're a member of the union. It's completely untrue, it's misleading, and it's despicable behaviour from a union heavily associated with those opposite. Of course, the economically illiterate Greens have already stated that they want this wage increase to be a 25% increase.